on that event. We just had a fairly, it looks like, benign Fed announcement that the equity market seemed to like. Of course, with Bitcoin, we look at expectations for real interest rates, so how much higher nominal rates are than inflation. If that number gets bigger, that's a challenge to Bitcoin. If that number gets smaller, Bitcoin kind of likes that.
A few days ago, NASDAQ, yes, that NASDAQ, made a move that almost no one outside the industry truly understood. But to those who've been watching the slow merge between blockchain and traditional finance, it was massive. It was the kind of signal that tells you the next era of global money flow isn't a theory anymore. That's already being built. And for holders of XRP and XLM, this isn't just news. It's confirmation. Because this $125 trillion bombshell isn't about hype. It's about infrastructure, trust, and timing, and how the digital assets built for global settlement are finally standing at the front door of institutional finance. The calm confidence of NASDAQ's move. Here's what's interesting. NASDAQ didn't make a loud crypto announcement. They don't need to. When a legacy institution like NASDAQ adjusts its strategy toward digital assets, tokenized markets, and blockchain-based settlement, it's not a trend play. It's a signal of readiness. And this readiness is worth roughly $125 trillion. The size of global securities and cross-border markets NASDAQ's infrastructure touches directly or indirectly. They've seen what's coming. Traditional finance is moving toward tokenization, stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities, everything being represented digitally. And once value moves digitally, it needs instant settlement, liquidity, and interoperability. That's where XRP and XLM walk in. Ripple and Stellar were built specifically for this. They're not DeFi tokens or meme coins. They're payment and liquidity protocols designed for exactly what NASDAQ and its partners are now building toward. So while most people read the headline and shrug, XRP and XLM holders saw the pattern. This wasn't random. It was the next piece of a puzzle that's been forming for years. The bridge is being built right under everyone's nose. Think about it. NASDAQ doesn't deal with speculation. They deal with settlement infrastructure for the world's largest financial institutions. When they start exploring tokenization platforms, digital asset custody, and blockchain-based rails for institutional settlements, it's not for the retail crowd. It's for the backbone of the global financial system. And if you zoom out, you'll see how this connects. Ripple, XRP, is already deep in talks with banks and payment providers across 50-plus countries. Stellar, XLM, has built payment corridors with MoneyGram, Circle, USDC, and even cross-border aid programs through the UN. Both are ISO 20022 compliant, meaning they can plug directly into the same financial messaging standards that NASDAQ and SWIFT now operate on. So when NASDAQ builds digital rails for tokenized assets, and Ripple and Stellar are already the rails for digital money, those two worlds are on a collision course. Except it's not a collision. It's alignment. That's the quiet part most people miss. The financial system isn't rejecting crypto. It's absorbing it. For holders, this hits differently. Let's be real. Being an XRP or XLM holder hasn't been easy. You've been mocked, doubted, and ignored. Every time you shared what you saw, how Ripple and Stellar were connecting global banks, regulators, and payment systems, someone laughed and said, "If that's true, why isn't the price pumping?" But here's what they never understood. You weren't betting on a moment. You were betting on infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't move fast. It moves deep. The kind of deep that reshapes entire industries before anyone realizes what's happening. The kind of deep where, one morning, banks, stock exchanges, and governments are using blockchain tech. Not because they want to, but because it's now the only thing that works. That's the level Ripple and Stellar have been building toward. And NASDAQ's quiet shift toward digital asset settlement? That's a sign that the rest of the world is finally catching up. $125 trillion is more than a number. It's a new financial map. When people see $125 trillion, they think of market size, stocks, bonds, derivatives. But what that number really represents is the flow of value between institutions, across borders, through systems that still run on outdated messaging tech. And once those assets become tokenized, once the value itself becomes digital, the question becomes, who settles it? Who bridges it? Who provides the liquidity? That's not something Bitcoin or Ethereum were built to handle efficiently. But XRP and XLM? That's their DNA. XRP connects institutional liquidity, think banks, central banks, and payment providers. XLM connects people and fintechs, think remittances, wallets, and humanitarian finance. Together, they cover the full spectrum, top-down and bottom-up. The global money web from central bank to consumer. And NASDAQ's move into tokenized settlement systems bridges exactly those worlds. That's not coincidence. It's convergence, the uncomfortable truth for latecomers. Here's the part most people won't want to hear. By the time this transition is visible to everyone, it'll already be too late to be early. The institutions will already have integrated their systems. The liquidity corridors will already be operational. And the price discovery moment, the one that everyone's waiting for, will be long gone. That's why early conviction matters. When NASDAQ moves, it's not reacting, it's signaling. And when institutions that manage trillions start building toward the exact infrastructure Ripple and Stellar have been perfecting for nearly a decade, that's not speculation anymore. That's inevitability slowly coming into focus. The moment before history notices. If you strip away the charts, the noise, and the tribal debates, what's really happening here is simple. The global financial system is quietly preparing to digitize everything: money, stocks, bonds, data. And that system needs neutral bridges that can handle instant settlement, high volume, and full regulatory compliance. Ripple and Stellar are the only two projects that have been building for that world from day one. So when NASDAQ quietly starts constructing the digital rails for a $125 trillion market, the writing's on the wall. The future of finance is already here, just not evenly distributed yet. And that's why XRP and XLM holders have every reason to stay patient. Because if you can see what's forming before it becomes obvious, you're not guessing anymore. You're witnessing the beginning of what everyone else will later call sudden. When people first heard about NASDAQ's $125 trillion statement, most shrugged it off like another flashy headline in the sea of crypto noise. But for those who've been following XRP and XLM for years, patiently holding through lawsuits, skepticism, and endless crypto winter talk, this one hit different. Because this wasn't just a number. It was a message, a quiet signal from the heart of traditional finance that the world is shifting. And that shift is already priced into nothing right now. Let's break that down. NASDAQ's $125 trillion reference didn't come from hype or speculation. It came from market infrastructure, the very backbone of how money moves globally. That figure represents the potential total value of tokenized real-world assets, from securities to commodities to cross-border settlements, all being prepared for digital rails. Now think about that. A legacy financial titan, the same institution that underpins Wall Street, just acknowledged that the future of global liquidity will run on digital assets. And in that system, settlement speed, compliance, and interoperability aren't luxuries. They're requirements. So who fits that mold perfectly? XRP and XLM. These two aren't the speculative, hype-driven meme tokens the internet obsesses over. They were built for this moment, engineered from day one to do what traditional systems couldn't. XRP's on-demand liquidity model was designed to eliminate friction in banking corridors. Stellar's open network was created to move value between institutions and people, fast, cheap, and transparent. And now, as NASDAQ and major financial entities openly embrace tokenization, it's like the puzzle pieces are finally clicking. You can almost feel it, that mix of quiet validation and disbelief. Because for years, XRP and XLM holders were told, "You're dreaming. The banks will never use crypto." Yet here we are watching NASDAQ, Swift, and global institutions quietly pivot toward the exact systems Ripple and Stellar have been building for over a decade. It's poetic, honestly. The irony is that this bombshell wasn't loud. It wasn't a crypto influencer screaming price predictions. There was a few lines in a report, corporate, dry, forgettable to most. But that's how real change enters the room. Quietly. By the time everyone wakes up to it, it's already integrated. Now let's go deeper. If you're sitting on XRP or XLM, what NASDAQ revealed isn't just bullish, it's existential validation. It means the rails you've believed in are being mapped directly into the world's largest markets. It means the same banks that once mocked blockchain are now building with it because they have to. The inefficiencies of the current system aren't sustainable anymore. Cross-border settlements today move like molasses in a world that moves at light speed. Fees pile up, waiting times stretch, and global trade keeps bleeding billions in unnecessary friction. Ripple solved that. Stellar scaled it. And NASDAQ, they just quietly confirmed they're paying attention. But here's the real takeaway, and it's one that stings a little. Most people won't believe this even now. They'll wait for the headlines that say, XRP partners with NASDAQ, or Stellar integrates with global markets. They'll wait for confirmation, for proof so loud they can't ignore it. And by that time, the opportunity will have moved on. That's always how it goes. The early believers get mocked. The middle crowd wakes up too late. And the ones who saw the pattern early, they don't chase hype. They understand structure. Because what NASDAQ just did isn't about promoting crypto. It's about adapting to survive. The financial world doesn't innovate because it wants to, it innovates because it has no choice. So, when you think about this $125 trillion bombshell, don't imagine fireworks. Imagine infrastructure. Imagine the invisible layer that makes it all work. The settlement, the clearing, the verification, all done in seconds across borders without middlemen. That's XRP. That's XLM. That's what you've been holding for. And it's not just about profit. It's about being part of a once-in-a-generation transition. One that will redefine how money, value, and trust move globally. When NASDAQ speaks, Wall Street listens. When Wall Street listens, global finance follows. And when that domino starts to fall, the networks already proven, regulated, and integrated will lead the charge. XRP is already working with banks through RippleNet. XLM is already being used for digital asset issuance, stablecoins, and payments through Stellar's partnerships with Circle, MoneyGram, and more. Add a $125 trillion infrastructure conversation to that mix, and suddenly, this doesn't look like a dream anymore. It looks like inevitability. And maybe that's the quietest but most powerful truth here. You were early, painfully early. And for once, early might actually mean right. So if you're an XRP or XLM holder, stop looking for hype and headlines. Start looking for alignment, because alignment is what institutions move on. And NASDAQ just confirmed that alignment is already underway. The next decade won't be about speculation. It'll be about integration. And the ones who stayed patient, the ones who believed in infrastructure and not hype, will finally see what that kind of conviction looks like when the system catches up. Close your eyes for a second. Picture this. It's 2028. The world's financial system doesn't look like it used to. Banks don't just hold money anymore. They move it instantly across borders, across currencies, across networks. NASDAQ isn't just an exchange. It's the digital highway of global value. And quietly humming beneath all of that, invisible to most, are the rails built by two networks that most people underestimated: XRP and XLM. You see, what NASDAQ did with that $125 trillion announcement wasn't just to forecast the next market wave. They announced the birth of an entirely new economy. An economy where every stock, bond, real estate share, carbon credit, and commodity can exist as a token, liquid, fractional, and tradable anywhere in the world in real time. That's tokenization, and it's not theoretical anymore. When the NASDAQ confirms that trillions in real-world assets are being prepared to flow into digital form, it's like watching the Internet of Money finally come online. Something XRP and XLM were architected for years before anyone even believed in the idea. Here's how it unfolds. Institutions begin by tokenizing their assets. Think of it like turning an entire skyscraper or a corporate bond into a digital unit that can be traded or settled instantly. NASDAQ provides the exchange layer, the data transparency, and the investor access. But here's the missing piece. Tokenized assets still need liquidity. They need settlement. They need a bridge between traditional fiat and the digital world. That's where XRP and XLM step in, silently, efficiently, and globally. XRP becomes the institutional liquidity rail, the bridge asset that allows tokenized securities to settle in seconds between banks, exchanges, and clearinghouses. RippleNet acts like the connective tissue between all these tokenized ecosystems, moving trillions behind the scenes without headlines or hype. Meanwhile, XLM, through Stellar, becomes the public-facing layer of this new economy. The one powering micropayments, payroll, and remittances for the billions of people who will one day hold digital shares, stablecoins, and digital currencies on their phones. Together, they don't compete, they complete the cycle. One anchors the institutions, the other empowers the people. And NASDAQ, they become the stage where these two worlds meet. The irony? Most viewers watching that future unfold will never even hear the words XRP or XLM. They'll just experience the benefits. Instant settlement, fractional ownership, borderless liquidity, all made possible by technology hidden in the background. It's like TCP, IP for the internet. No one talks about it, but without it, nothing works. That's where XRP and XLM are heading. The $125 trillion NASDAQ projection isn't a random statistic. It's a declaration of intent. That's Wall Street saying we're digitizing everything. And when they do, they'll need rails that can actually handle the scale, compliant, fast, energy-efficient, interoperable rails. Sound familiar? Those are the exact design principles Ripple and Stellar were built on. And that's not coincidence, that's foresight. Imagine a world where a real estate fund in Singapore settles a $100 million trade with an investor in New York. Instantly. The transaction runs through RippleNet, the liquidity source through XRP, and the asset itself listed and tokenized on a NASDAQ-powered exchange. No waiting, no correspondent banking delays, just global flow, seamless, transparent, and unstoppable. And at the consumer level, the Kenyan developer receives a salary from a US-based DAO through Stellar USDC. The payment lands in seconds. Fees? Almost nothing. The same infrastructure that moves Wall Street trillions now powers the unbanked billions. That's the bridge. That's the symmetry. That's why this NASDAQ revelation isn't about hype. It's about alignment. Because the institutions building the next decade of finance are finally realizing that they can't keep patching an old system with duct tape. They need a new foundation, one that's already been tested, one that's already scaled, one that's already compliant with global standards like ISO 20022, the very same language XRP and XLM speak fluently. So when people laugh at holders for being too patient, too hopeful, too early, they're missing the truth. This patience isn't naive, it's visionary. The early believers in XRP and XLM didn't invest in a coin, they invested in infrastructure. And infrastructure takes time. It builds quietly, it integrates slowly, and then one day it just exists everywhere. That's where we're headed. When NASDAQ made that announcement, they didn't say we're adopting XRP or we're partnering with Stellar. They didn't need to. The message was in the numbers. $125 trillion worth of assets moving toward tokenization means one thing. The world is preparing for digital settlement at scale. And when that happens, liquidity isn't optional. It's the lifeblood. And for the first time, it feels like the world is waking up to the truth that XRP and XLM holders have known all along. That the real value isn't in speculation, it's in utility. It's in being part of the architecture that the future will depend on. That's not hype. That's history unfolding in real time. After everything we've unpacked, the NASDAQ's quiet revelation, the institutional puzzle finally aligning, the invisible rails being built beneath the surface. There's one truth that's hard to ignore. You've been early to something the world is only beginning to understand. For years, XRP and XLM holders have been dismissed, mocked, or told to move on. But when you strip away the noise and look at what's actually happening, at how NASDAQ, Swift, Ripple, Stellar, and the entire ISO 20022 ecosystem are quietly sinking, you realize something powerful. This isn't speculation anymore. It's structure. And that structure is starting to move. The NASDAQ's $125 trillion forecast isn't about hype. It's about readiness. It means the financial world isn't just flirting with blockchain anymore. It's committing to it. They're tokenizing, they're building, they're integrating. And the technologies that were once called too early are now being written into the next version of global finance. It's funny, isn't it? When you believed in XRP or XLM 5, 6, even 10 years ago, it wasn't because you had all the answers. It was because something about the vision made sense. The idea that money should move as easily as information. That settlement shouldn't take 3 days. that sending value should be as simple as sending an email. And now, slowly, the rest of the world is catching up to what you saw long ago. But here's the part that most people still miss. When a system like NASDAQ starts preparing for $125 trillion in tokenized assets, they're not just upgrading technology, they're rewriting the plumbing of the world economy. And when you rewrite the plumbing, the pipes matter. That's where XRP and XLM come in. Not as speculative tokens, but as the pipes that can carry the world's value across every exchange, every bank, every border. Think about it this way, the last time an infrastructure shift like this happened was when the internet replaced paper. Back then, nobody cared about HTTP or IP packets. They just wanted faster communication. Now it's the same thing, except this time it's money. People won't care about settlement layers or bridge assets. They'll just see faster, cheaper, global value flow, powered quietly by networks like XRP and XLM. And when that happens, when that shift becomes invisible but universal, that's when early conviction finally pays off. Because the truth is, wealth doesn't move to where the hype is. It moves to where trust is built. And that trust has been forming quietly between Ripple, Stellar, regulators, and institutions like NASDAQ that now see the future isn't coming. It's here. The world's largest exchanges are preparing. The banks are aligning. The protocols are merging under one global language, ISO 20022. And the networks fluent in that language are XRP and XLM. So if you're watching this as a holder, maybe you've been patient, maybe even discouraged, I want you to understand this. Every infrastructure revolution starts the same way. First, they ignore it. Then they laugh at it. Then they regulate it. And finally, they build on it. That's where we are now. We've entered the building phase. And while everyone's distracted by short-term price action or speculation, the ones who understand utility are quietly preparing for what's coming next, the biggest liquidity migration in modern history. When $125 trillion worth of value starts flowing digitally, it won't move on speculation. It'll move on rails that are ready. It'll move on systems that are compliant. It'll move on networks that can scale without breaking. And when that time comes, the question won't be, is XRP or XLM still relevant? It'll be, how did we ever function without them? So here's what I want to leave you with. If you've held through the noise, if you've stayed curious instead of cynical, if you've watched the world slowly confirm what you already knew, you're not just an investor. You're part of the foundation. And when the dust settles, history tends to remember the builders, the believers, and the ones who saw the shift before anyone else did. So tell me this in the comments. How long have you been holding XRP or XLM? And more importantly, what made you believe in the first place? Because honestly, that story, your story, deserves to be heard.